This episode of Drawn to It podcast is brought to you by Cat Animation Online Art School, offering their students high-quality mentoring by experienced, caring professionals in animation, story design, and much more at very affordable prices. Beginning and advanced classes and mentoring slots for the spring semester of 2021 are forming now. Don't miss the opportunity to learn and grow from Disney-trained animators and artists currently working in the animation industry. Visit www.cat-animation.com for details about their unique school, their distinguished faculty, and how to apply for future classes or mentoring. They look forward to working with you in the near future. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today's guest is 2D animator James Lopez, and he talks about his career in feature film and his own property, Hullabaloo, right here on Drawn to It podcast. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's my pleasure. I actually saw one of your podcasts earlier. I was watching one. I forget, it was with the guy who does the Chunky Chicken.
Michael Cook.
Yeah. It was a really long one, but it was funny. I listened to it while I was working, like throughout the day, and I really liked it, And,
thank you. I appreciate that.
And I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I really like what you're doing too. And I saw like the other, I went to your channel and I saw the library of like, oh wow, you've done like so many of these with so many different professionals, like a wide, gamut of.
Yeah. It's the whole goal is to try to inspire people who are in the animation and film industry at different levels, right? So the newcomer and the seasoned pro. And the best way to do that, I've been finding, is just listening to people's stories, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been getting some amazing emails from people who are like, "Wow, this really connected with me," and that keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Like with me, like I think the one that you and I forget, I'm so bad with names already.
Michael?
Michael. Yes, thank you. Sorry. I think you were talking about like vulnerability and stuff like that. And it's funny because it's not something that usually you hear people talk about. And I was like really like, my ear was like wide open. I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are actually talking about this. And, and sometimes it's usually stuff that I only talk about with like a close friend at lunch or something like that. And so now I hear like two other people just openly talking about it, for the world to hear. And I'm like, oh wow, this is great.
I just want to be open and honest, and there's a lot of stuff. I agree with you. A lot of these topics I wouldn't talk about until it was lunchtime or coffee time with my coworkers, and I'd be like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna finish this scene today. I feel, and I feel depressed and whatever it might be. And I've gotten to the point in my life where I need to recognize that's part of my day-to-day, just trying to get through the day a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I just got to thinking, I'm probably not the only one. And maybe putting it out there might help people who really feel like they're at the bottom of that mountain looking up, which is one of my favorite cliches to repeat, but it's so true.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've been doing a lot of talks online over this past year, and they usually involve like a talk, and then it goes into a question answer Q&A period, and a lot of the questions that seem to be reoccurring each time is somebody is asking, how do they keep up, I want to say keep motivated, I think is what it was, that whole thing. And then I would say, well, this is a good one, because let's talk about that. Let's talk about, and even the mental aspect of it, and that's what I start to get into, is that that whole mental aspect, like how do you get yourself out of a hole when you're in it? How do you get yourself out of a funk? That kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
trust me, like especially these past 5 years for me, oh my gosh, it's been such a
Really.
yeah, it's been such like an up and down um, roller coaster ride of emotions, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I bet COVID hasn't helped at all.
yeah, I mean, and well, that's the other thing too. And yeah, yeah, and on top of all that,
Yeah.
so
It's a lot.
yeah, so I think it's good to talk about, and I think after talking about it, I hoped it really helped those people. I realized, yeah, there's like we talk about the principles of animation, but I think
Hmm.
it's so important to talk about the mental aspect, about not giving up, and how do you stay motivated. And I would tell them certain things, um, and I think it's good.
Yeah. Well, it's really good for people to hear it from somebody like yourself who is
Mhm,
like at that major league level.
mhm.
And if somebody like yourself is having these thoughts and feelings, and then yes, it's a real thing. And to hear it from Mountain High that, even somebody like me deals with this and here's how I overcame it. I mean, that is so inspiring. It gives everybody in that audience that sort of, okay, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Or if I can follow their path of how they did it, maybe I have a chance.
Yeah,
So,
it's like an allowance in a way,
yeah.
you know. And
Hmm.
it's funny because I go all the way back. When I think about it, and one of the stories I tell is, oh, do we want to get started? I'm sorry, I'm all like
We're
meandering.
we're started now. I
Oh,
don't do an official intro.
oh,
I record the intro separately, so we're good to go.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
I'm so used to something else, but okay, cool.
yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
were mentioning a story. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So, um, very early on in my career, I was working at Disney, and I was working with Chris Buck, who I don't know if many of you know. He's ultimately now like the co-director of Frozen.
Hmm.
He was also supervising animator at Disney for many many years, and I was working under him on Pocahontas, and he was going over one of my scenes, and it's one of those things where I'm watching him over his shoulder, as he's going, and he's working away, and I'm just marveling at the job that he's doing. I'm just saying these are such great drawings, and then
Yeah.
and then what he does is he takes that drawing and he throws it on the floor, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Like that was
Yeah.
a perfectly good drawing."
Yeah.
And he threw it away because it didn't work. And I think what that did at that moment was that it gave me permission and allowance to say that it's okay to throw away good drawings. It's for the
Hmm.
greater good that it works versus the actual physical drawing, the aesthetic
Hmm.
of it and stuff. I'm like, and to see him work through it and see him do good work and throw it away, do good work and throw it away, really kind of conditioned me to have that kind of discipline to be able
Hmm.
to do that. And many times, like throughout my career, I can think of the times where it's like, wow, I you know, I really like what I did, but I got to admit it's not right. And it's just just the pain of taking it off the pegs and setting it aside, never to be seen again,
Yeah.
put in the discard pile. It's like, okay, but you know, there's a greater
Yeah.
good here.
Well, that's such a tough thing to wrestle with your ego and not get married to every single drawing you do and not be so precious with it.
Mhm.
And it's really hard to learn that skill that you're talking about by letting the drawings hit the floor or trace over them again and try to plus it.
Yeah.
Um, but I find a lot of people, especially starting out, we tend to get very attached to that first effort, and we're like, "Oh, I put everything into this. This is it."
Mhm.
Well, maybe that's just your foundation, you
Mhm.
know? Then maybe you gotta do another pass to
Yeah.
plus it, and it does. It takes time and humility to allow yourself to be like, "Okay, not everything I draw is a gift from God,"
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And it's even
yeah.
harder to like, kind of show, even share with people that, and sometimes, and I know it took me a while to like kind of start sharing people like, like this is my first rough, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
like this is how, because I think it was kind of revealing, you know what I mean? It's like, you know,
Yeah. Well,
um,
that brings up a question I love to ask animators that I look up to, and you are one of them. When I was working at Disney, I was constantly having videos you were doing playing while I was working.
mm,
I really gravitated to your delivery, something about the calmness in your approach, and because I tend to get very, oh, why isn't this working, right? And
yeah.
you were like, well, maybe I'll just try again. I'm like, I envy
Uh,
that.
oh,
Yeah.
well, actually, truth be told, I think maybe that's part of a facade, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because I can tell you when I go to work, I'm very anxious. I'm very, you know what I mean? And I'm one of those people that, like, I don't work 8 hours a day, but I work very intently for like 2 or 3 hours a day. You know what I mean?
Yes, me too. Me
Are you
too.
like,
That's
okay?
me.
Yeah, see,
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
makes it hard is like, I kind of, and I had to kind of take a while to accept that because I find myself kind of milling about for a large portion of the day and kind of feeling down like, am I a slouch? Am I a lazy?
Yes, I've had that. I look around at my peers and I'm like, they are still grinding at
Yeah,
full throttle and I am done.
yeah,
And it's like 1:30 in the afternoon and I'm on payroll till 5, you know?
yeah, exactly. And I
So,
had to realize, like, think about it when you're like out of breath and whatever, you're like you did it. And that's just how I operate,
yeah.
And
Yeah.
but yeah, and so yeah, there's a part of it maybe like where I think again when I think about talking to people or making videos, there's also that thing of like, well, you don't want to be too anxious because you want it to feel doable.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I like to be revealing about the process, especially now, later in life, because I realized, through the journey, I realized like going through the anxiety of all is what kind of built up to where I am today. You know what
Mhm. Yeah.
and I still struggle with stuff every day, but what I've learned to do is kind of accept it as part of the process. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
um, and somewhat is an exciting part of the process. Especially over the last. I mean, well, it's been I would say like the last real 10 to 15 years. I know it's like half of my career has really been about trying to get out of my comfort zone and
Yeah.
a constant process of working with new styles and taking on new challenges that really caused me to kind of say, well, I don't know how to do this, but on the same token, I don't know that I won't be able to do it either. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, like when somebody would say, like, we need help with painting backgrounds, I didn't say no because I mean, I've never painted a background before. So, how do I know that I don't know how to do it? You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So I said, okay,
So
well, I'll give it a try.
you're kind of like your thought process is you can't once you've tried and failed so miserably that you
Yeah.
don't want to try again. Like guilty until proven innocent type
Yeah.
of uh approach to it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
innocent until proven guilty.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
That's
that's
great.
kind of it, and that's why I keep telling particularly students or people that I do lectures for. I say it's worth a try. Give it a try because you never know, and I'm glad that I accepted the challenges when I did because I stuck with it, and I think I came out for the better,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, when you were starting out with like at that feature film level, did you wrestle with imposter syndrome?
mm, yeah, I did actually a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, um, yeah, all the time, um, and it was even worse when people even didn't. I don't say they didn't believe in you, but there's been a few times where I think I kind of felt like, there, like for example, I go back to Emperor's New Groove,
Hmm.
and and I was originally cast to do the David Spade character, the Prince Manco. Well, he is Cuzco now, but at the time I think
Hmm.
he was called Prince Manco,
Yeah.
and it was a human character. I don't know if I've ever done a human character before, except for maybe like the goofy type, like Wiggins and Ratcliffe in
Hmm.
Pocahontas. So, but this one was a little bit more. Uh, I want to say like the anatomy was more real, and it was a hard design on top of it. It was supposed to be stylized. Anyways, I wrestled with that thing. I
Hmm.
really, really wrestled with that thing. And I remember at one time I kind of felt like, we would, the supervising animators we would get together every, I don't know, so often. I don't know if it was like weekly or monthly or something like that. And we were all supposed to be doing experimental animation tests, and we'd come together and we'd share what each other had done.
Hmm.
And it always felt like, the top supervisor would show their stuff and everybody would be like, oh, it's great. It's genius. I love it. Blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
then the next person would go up in line and they'd show it. Oh, it's great. It's genius. I love it. Blah, blah, blah. And then then I was the last one to go, and I popped my tape in, and then everyone would just pause, and they'd be like, "Well, if you will try, well, maybe if like,"
Right.
it was like there was no like
I know
great
exactly what you're
sequence,
talking about. Yeah.
and
Your heart sinks and you're just like, oh.
yeah, and it's funny because I
Yeah.
was talking with a friend of mine who was on the picture, and because I always felt that I was like one pencil stroke away from being let go. Like I
Yeah.
think I had it in my mind, that imposter syndrome, that I think, I think they're catching on, and I think that the hammer is going to fall any minute now, and I'm going to get pulled into an office, and they're going to say, hey Jamie, sometimes things don't work out. And I'd be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then I remember I talking to my friend about it. He said, no, that's not how it was like at all. But that was the perception that I had put, I guess, on myself.
Yeah, you put so much pressure on yourself to perform
Yeah,
at what you perceive to be a level that's so high up there because of what your peers are doing. And you don't recognize the worth in your own work.
exactly. Yeah, it's like hard to have
Yeah.
an objective opinion. You know what I mean? And that's why
Yeah.
it's kind of fragile, because it seems like, you're so reliant upon somebody else validating either
Yeah.
your existence or your worth, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then when it doesn't get validated, or even worse, when it comes back in negative validation, then you really, really sink. You know what I mean? Because you don't have anything else to fall back on. So there's a certain amount of like either ego um, or self pride, or whatever you want to call it, to kind of create like like in Star Trek, like it's like your shields, like shields up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, the photon torpedo will get through, but the damage will be nullified to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're looking for the weakness in your peers' shields because you need to know that they're human too and they
Yeah,
screw up. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's happened. You know what I mean? And I think when it did happen, um, full circle, because I know when we did Princess and the Frog, we go back to Princess and the Frog. It was, yeah, there was a lot of that going around too. And I
Hmm.
found myself now being approached to actually redo other people's work. you know, and
Oh,
yeah,
the
and that
tables have turned.
yeah, and it was very, very awkward. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you knew that at some point they were going to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember having conversations in the hallway, and it's one of those things where it's like, look, it wasn't up to me. I didn't request this. This was,
Yeah.
I had to do it. This was my job. They
Yeah.
asked me. I didn't. You know, I had to go back to the director and say, hey, can I take a pass on that? No, it was
Oh, it's
very awkward,
crazy.
and so that's why I was very, you know careful to be like supportive, to say, it's it's subjective, it's whatever.
Yeah.
I'd always go back to say, it's like, what you're doing, just for whatever reason. It happens to everybody. And I even had my stuff redone even on that film too, and and I didn't even know it. I'd see it in dailies or something, and that's always the best part, when when at the wrap party, when you go to the wrap party, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh boy, let's see how it all turned out, because after you're done with the animation, you leave a project for, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, while they're doing all the posts and everything, and then they
Yeah.
have a party. You're like, oh, let's go, and then you're watching it and you're waiting for your scene, and that you get that whole business where you're like pointing, everyone's pointing, like, oh wait, that was my joint. Oh wait, that was my joint. Wait,
Yeah.
that was my, and you wait for your scene to come up, and then you watch it, and it's like, oh, wait, whoa, hold on. You're like, you almost want to tell the
Yeah.
projections, "Hey, stop, wait, wait, rewind that back. That's
Yeah.
not mine. Who did that?"
Yeah.
But nobody else cares, because they're all watching the movie. Like, did anybody see that? That wasn't mine. Who
Yeah.
did that? You're like, somewhere between when you turned it in and when the film came out, some little elf, somewhere was secretly redoing your stuff. You're just like, oh my god. And
Yeah.
then and then you catch up with, the director at the bar, and you're like, so that scene, what would happen? And you don't want to have that conversation, because, like, it's like, for whatever reason things change, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, but
Yeah.
you still want to know, like, was it because I failed and you were just too afraid to tell me, or what,
Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's like you're in my head, because when I was at Disney, I wasn't in the major leagues like yourself. I was part of Disney Interactive. I was hired as an animator to work on the Club Penguin property out of the Kelowna office in BC. And I was part of the marketing team, so I didn't work on the in-game artwork. I worked on the television commercial animation stuff. So, it was a higher quality, and it was very satisfying. But I remember every now and then they would show like the final commercial, and it would be one that I was the lead on. So I was basically directing it.
Oh,
And then, you go home for the weekend, come in on Monday, and they show you the final render. And I'd see a scene that's like, that's not how it was. What happened? To find out that my supervisor had gone in and like tweaked something, and I would feel so like yourself, like you were just saying, like you just didn't want to tell me it sucked.
yeah.
You thought you didn't believe I could handle the critique or what, all these thoughts, and it would just ruin my day,
Yeah,
right?
I know. It plays on your mind. It really
Yeah.
does. It's like
Yeah.
you want closure on it, and you realize at some point you're not going to get that closure, and that's when you realize you have to work that mental exercise to let it go. you know?
Well, it comes down to insecurity.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a medical process right now that requires me to go through a bout of therapy and stuff. And I'm coming face to face with just how insecure I am, both as an artist and as a person in general.
Mhm.
And it's really scary stuff. And it can be very paralyzing. It can really hold you back from taking chances and trying. And,
Mhm.
when I think back on it, it's a miracle I accomplished half the stuff I did in, whatever career I've had, because my self worth uh, opinion is so low.
Mm.
What I'm realizing now and working on, but as artists, the more animators I talk to and artists, creatives of all types, I find they're very low self-esteem in general.
Mm.
And then we choose to be an artist where we put our heart and soul into something
Yeah.
and put it on display and say, judge it,
Yeah.
right? It seems completely paradoxical,
It
but
is. No,
yeah.
it's funny. I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm glad you're getting help. And I also say, you are amongst friends because like I mean, we could probably go on and on about this. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how, man, like I go through those very things. And my problem is, are you married or,
I am.
okay.
Yes. 4 kids.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm married. I have 2 girls, they're
Yeah.
they're older and stuff. And, I talk to my wife about it all the time. And then she's great because she listens. And then there's a point where it's like, you know what, this is just bringing our whole family spirit down. I gotta move on. Let's talk about other things. Let's talk about the girls and stuff. And it's really kind of like, kind of to a point helps me kind of try and move along. But man, I'm telling you, every day, every week, it's something, that really, I just got out of my last job that I just I lost my job last year, like October. It was an extremely toxic situation.
Oh no.
And it was one of those things where, I had to, it was really eating me away, inside, you know what I mean? And creating undue stress. And, and I really had to like, it was one of those things where I had to leave the situation voluntarily. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
and for my own good. And even throughout my career, I mean, well, I don't know if we want to talk about those stories, but it's like, no, seriously, throughout my 30-year career, I have experienced so much stuff. Like, I feel like this is that Roy Batty moment, at the end of Blade Runner. Like I've seen things that you
Yeah.
wouldn't believe. You know what I mean? Like, no, seriously, like I've been in situations where, like, my God, like, how did I ever survive that? I don't know
Yeah.
how I ever survived that because it was so audacious. I mean and that's why when I use, I don't know if I have a platform, but like, this past year, I know a lot of people have been asking because that's all we have now is Zoom and online
Mhm.
talks and stuff like that, to kind of
Yeah.
talk before, to share our thing. And I'm really an advocate of like, and this is hard, of telling people like, listen, those of you coming into this, when people ask you, like, there's that often question, like, if you could tell yourself something, if you go back in time and tell yourself advice or whatever it was,
Mm.
this is that moment. And I say, you are going to encounter some of the most fiendish people that
Yeah.
you ever know. And your
Yeah.
job, the hardest part is going to have to deal with those people. And that's why I always say, like, sometimes with the animation thing is like, animation's easy. Animation's easy. Drawing characters, designing characters, painting backgrounds, coming up with lands, that stuff's easy. Drawing a perspective, that's easy. The hardest part is dealing with the people. And it really
That
is.
can be very true.
It
Yeah.
is. Because that's the only
Yeah.
thing that stands in my way. Because those people demoralize you so much
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it keeps you from working. It's like, like having COVID on top of all of this. It depresses you, and it puts you into a state of depression that is now an extra layer that you have to fight for, because creating was already a challenge in and of itself, and now you have this
Mhm.
on top of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why I say, like, if I could just create, I'd be fine. But if I have to go through somebody, that just makes it that's what makes it hard.
Yeah. Especially if it's a committee.
Yeah.
And there are people that are just trying to earn their paycheck, which is something that's come up in the last few episodes of Drawn to It,
Mm.
talking about those executives who, you know, they could earn their paycheck just as well by not saying anything, but they feel they need to make some kind of bullcrap comment that is
Yeah.
just stupid,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it just, that I always found that to be very demoralizing, because I go back to my desk and I'd be like, how did all these untalented people become the kings and queens of all the talent? How does that happen?
Yeah.
Because they don't get it, you
Yeah.
know?
No, I did a lot of exploration with that, especially like over the last year, like really taking the time, mulling it over in my head. And this is what I like to do, and I don't know if this is a attribute of being a Libra, because I'm not really into that astrology thing. But what
Yeah.
I find myself doing a lot is weighing both sides of an issue, or maybe even the three or four sides of an issue, all sides of the
Hmm.
issue. You know what I mean? Um, Basically, trying to look at it from somebody else's point of view. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm looking at it from an artist's point of view, but let me stop that. Let me look at it from an executive's point of view. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And see what I can get out of that. How does that executive view me? How does that executive view the process? And it's almost like Quantum Leap. I don't know if you remember that show,
Yeah,
Quantum
yeah,
Leap. You know what I mean? Where you kind of
yeah,
have to transport yourself into their
yeah.
body to kind of fully understand, like, okay, like now that I've been there, I think I kind of get it. Okay. All right.
Hmm.
Now back to being an artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And it
It's a very fine tightrope walk you have to
yeah,
do.
exactly.
Yeah,
And because
yeah.
I've been on all sides of it now. Like over my 30 years career, I've been at the entry level, and
Hmm.
I've been at the supervising level and everything in between. And so I
Hmm.
I know what it's like, um and I kind of made a vow, like, when I get to that supervisory level, uh, it's like, eh, don't forget where you came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I treat my staff or my unit with that sensitivity. You know what I mean? When I'm working with somebody who's just coming into the industry, I take note of that, and
Yeah.
I make an extra effort to say, that's pretend like, okay, that's me. How would I have liked to have been treated back then, and how was I treated back then, and what worked and what didn't, because
Yeah.
when I first got into the industry, I worked with a supervisor who was very strict, you know
Hmm.
and at the time it was kind of like, wow, they're such an a-hole. You know what I mean? you know
Yeah, yeah.
but the fact that they were strict with me was actually a really good thing. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it kept me on my toes, and gave me charge and reason. Now, there's a fine line there between being strict and being abusive. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
There's a difference there. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so I would have to figure out where that line is and say, okay, you're not going to do that, but you are going to do this. You know what I mean? And I think there's a way of doing it. And yeah, and so that's what I would do, is kind of follow in the footsteps and take the good parts and leave out the bad.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I would get thanks for it. You know what I mean? And that was really nice, because it was like, an acknowledgement and a validation of the efforts that I put in to kind of assure me, like, I'm doing the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, most artists tend to perform better when they're working from inspiration, right? That constant energy of inspiration.
Right.
When you're trying to work under oppression, it's like, I mean, it's a grind,
Yeah.
right? It really is brutal. I used to compare it to everybody thinks about leadership like a pyramid, right? And the boss is at top. And I always say the best bosses, if you invert the pyramid, are holding up the team,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
I like that.
and they tend to get the best out of their crew that way by saying, listen, I'm here for you. It's not that you're here for me. I'm here for you. We're here for each other, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I really like that. And I know like recently, like, like past few projects, I think I've encountered that where I've been like a director and supervisor. And my whole thing was that, when you're working with other artists, you realize there's a lot of exchange of ideas to be had. And the one thing that I think I would end up doing is, and especially being a supervisor at Disney on characters, people would come with their rough test and then stuff like that.
Hmm.
And what I've kind of learned is that a certain level of, I want to say, acceptance in that, I would greet their work with, well, it's not what I would do,
Hmm.
but it's good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always seemed like the supervisor, like in the animation business, there always seems to be like this unspoken game of like, can you read my mind? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you do the work and you show it to your supervisor and you're looking for approval, and it's always like, oh, let's, you know, like, let's go, Johnny. What shot
Yeah.
should be next? Should it be a medium wide, or a close up?
Yeah.
You're like,
Well, to bounce off that statement, are you a big fan of thumbnailing and showing the supervisor the thumbnails, or not? Because I've had people at your level say, "No, just do it," and then I had Ron Husband on, who's a big fan of thumbnailing. He would say he would spend most of his time working out the thumbnails, and then the shorter portion of the time on the actual animation. And that kind of makes sense to me. But where do you sit with that?
well, where I sit with that is this: it's whether it's thumbnails or full on drawings. My whole thing
Hmm.
is about time and effort.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, um, and that, you see, for me, like, I think I do thumbnails, but I do them full size, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. The
Yeah.
point is that ultimately what I tell like students and stuff to do is to learn how to do a shorthand, something that is quick, that is clear and quick, but doesn't take enough time, because you have to be prepared for the rejection. and
Yeah.
and when you face that rejection, what I find where a lot of people get into trouble, honestly, in the industry, where they get into conflicts and they start arguing points, is because they feel as though, well, hell, I spent all day on that thing. I'm going to
Yeah.
defend my stance in that, and it's not really based upon the idea so much as it is. It's like, I don't want to have to redo this all over again. You see, you have
Yeah.
to be in that point where you have to be able to brush it off. You have to say, oh, you want me to redo it? That's okay, no problem, because it only took me half an hour. Ha ha ha. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Like, you have to
Yeah.
be able to say, no skin off my nose. It's like, okay, you know what? No problem. It didn't take me long to do. Let me do it again.
Yeah.
How about that? There we
Yeah.
go. You see what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, good. So, yeah, because it's so subjective, it's too fragile, it's too easy for somebody just to say, I don't like it, and do it again. And
Yeah.
so you don't want to put too much. It's like you want to put just enough effort so that you don't shortchange yourself either. So you aren't showing it and they're saying, I can't see this, I don't know what's going on. But you don't want to put too much effort that if they want to throw it away, that you feel the grief. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
creating that balancing point, of that. And so that's
Yeah.
why I say, like, I mean, I've had shots approved. What was it on on Emperor's New Groove? I had shots approved because I shot it live action. I was working with Mark Dindal
Oh, wow.
on it. No, seriously, seriously. I was working with Mark Dindal on these shots. It was I think of Pacha eating at the table at the diner or something like that, and he's like, whatever, and and I shot it live action, and or what? Or no. It was no. You know what it was? It was I think it was Pacha and Cusco at the bridge after he saved the bridge, and they're doing that banter back and forth. And he's like, "You just saved my life," and you're like, "I knew it." And what I did was I filmed it. I,
Yeah.
I filmed the acting, and I got the buy off on that. Like Mark Dindo,
Yeah.
because thankfully, experienced director and stuff, he was able to see that, as a director and say, "Yeah, I like that action. So now just draw it."
Yeah.
So that's how
That's
I got
great.
got approved on live action. Then all I had to do from there is just draw it and make sure that it held up, you know, to the live action, and I got it approved. So that was a form of thumbnailing. I look at thumbnailing
Yeah.
as it's not about creating little small drawings. It's about sharing of ideas before you go full in on it. So if you want to do it tiny little sketches where you have to use a magnifying glass, great. If you want to do it
Yeah.
full size, on paper, great. If you want to do it live action, great. It's the idea
Yeah.
of like checking in before you go full on in and say, this is my plan. This is what I have in mind. And however that manifests itself, great. But yeah, I do definitely am all about like, yeah, plan ahead,
Plan ahead.
plan
Yeah.
ahead, get your buy off as soon as you can on
Yeah.
on the on the overall. You know what I mean? And then you can just go off to your mountain and just, you know,
Yeah.
draw to your heart's content. Like that's what I would do. I would just like, let me just get the buy off now. Once I get the buy off, on the general thing,
Yeah.
then I can just switch gears and then go into drawing mode and just.
Now, when you're in drawing mode,
Mhm.
are you the type of animator where a little more on the milk call digital printer side where you're drawing exactly what you see in your head, or are you more exploratory? It takes you a couple under drawings to really find it, that type of thing.
Um, I really, yeah, what I might do is like, well, I'll definitely do like a really rough shorthand,
Mm-hmm.
of what I've done. So I've conditioned myself to uh, do a shorthand and be able to tie it down. And it's one of those things where it's like again where um, when I do my shorthand, I constantly have to make a deal with myself, and I say, well, I know this isn't what it should look like, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
but I know that I can make it happen, you know what I mean? But is the
Yeah.
foundation there? So now I say I have to like make a deal with myself and say, no, you can make it happen. You have good bones here. Now it's just now make it happen. And sometimes as I go making it happen, I do approach kind of trepidly where I will do like a second round that's a little bit more defined. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll start taking my loose gestures and start applying the uh, actual proportions to it. They're still
Mm-hmm.
rough, mind you, but it's a
Yeah.
little closer on target. And then I'll test that again, and then I'll gain my confidence as I go. You see,
Each
so
pass. Yeah.
with each
I
pass,
can relate to that. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll probably do like 2 or 3 passes on my scene
Yeah.
until I really feel like I get it. Like, okay, you know what? Okay, I can definitely see this will work. Now it's just a matter of just including all the drawings, but this will definitely work. And so now I can just kind of relax, switch modes, put on the music, put on the TV in the background, and just kind of go at it with a certain amount of confidence, even knowing that maybe at the very, 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 very end, I might have to do like a little bit of tweaking. But I,
Yeah.
at least the odds I feel are in my favor, where it's like, well, there's a 95% chance that this will work. Yeah.
Have you worked on something and when it's all finished, be in a frame of mind where you're like, I can't believe I did that because right now in this moment, I don't know if I could do that again.
Yeah.
Like you almost go into a trance when you're doing it, and when it's all done, you're just like, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that's the magic of animation for me, quite honestly, because
Yeah.
once I do finish it off, and I'm at my pencil tester that I have behind me here. You can barely see it, but
Yeah.
that is that Friday afternoon high. You know what I mean? When you have done some preliminary testing, but you haven't tested the final, and then you're shooting that thing, and as you're shooting that thing, bloop, putting down paper, bloop, putting down paper, bloop, you're
Yeah.
anticipating, like what is this going to look like? Oh my God, and then you hit your last drawing, and then you're like, okay, and then you sit
Yeah.
there and watch it, and Brian, I'm telling you, like it never gets old. It escapes you it escapes me every time. Like
Yeah.
I look at it and I just like, and it's weird because you know that you had a hand in doing this, and you were the only hand in doing this.
Yeah.
But yet at
Yeah.
the same time, it's like, I don't know how I did that. How did that happen? It's like it takes on a life of its own, and it's like
Yeah.
it never gets old, and that's why I stayed being an animator, because that high, that exhilarated feeling of like seeing it come to life and take on a life of its own, and it's almost like you don't own it anymore. Like it's almost like at
Hmm.
that point, it's weird. It's weird to think you just it's like you don't own it anymore, um,
Yeah.
and it exists now on its own. On its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that feeling all too well. And I get home after, working on whatever, and I just say to my wife, like, I did this thing today that I never knew I could do, and I don't know if I could do it again. I just don't know how I did it.
Yeah.
And but it turned out, and I don't know, I'm just on cloud nine over it. And she'd be like, "Oh, that's nice, dear." Like, no, you can't fully get her to see it from,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's an amazing thing when you're taking just a series of drawings and just turning it into life. And,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Now, you mentioned your pencil tester there.
Oh yeah.
Um, have you adopted to any of the digital platforms like TV Paint, Toon Boom, whatever?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like now, what I use, I use lately I've been using Storyboard Pro to animate in.
Yeah.
It's not designed to do it, but it works.
No, it's not.
It works so long as you keep it to like one level. It works. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can't really do
Yeah.
two characters on it because the timing will have to be different. But for one level stuff, it works out great.
Hmm.
I like working digitally. I mean, I saw what TV Paint can do. I think it's hugely impressive. I wouldn't. Yeah, maybe at some point I'll explore it. Toon Boom, same thing. Except the
Yeah.
drawing tools, I think, are just slightly different. But I've kind of roughed out stuff in Toon Boom too, and I like it.
Yeah.
I like animating digitally because I like animating, and I think why I did it, why I do stuff like what I would do is, at the time I would my process would be to I was using Digicel Flipbook, and
Oh, yes.
I would animate sometimes my shots in Digicel Flipbook, and then once I got it to a point, I would print it out.
Yeah.
I would print it out on paper with registration marks, and then I'd
Yeah.
take it to my animation desk, tape it up onto paper, 12 field
So you
paper.
did it backwards.
I did
Most
it
people do it
backwards.
the other way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because what I found is this is what gets me. This is what always frustrates me because I would want to experiment, and I'd rough through and I'd rough it through, and then I'd go through the pencil tester, like put down paper, and then I'd
Yeah.
play it and be like, damn, it didn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I take those pieces of drawings and then I throw them in the bin. Now it was different. I'm talking about I would do this on my Hullabaloo project because it wasn't so bad at Disney because the paper wasn't mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like there was plenty of paper in the supply cabinet that if I ran out, I just go back and get it. But once it's
Yeah.
like your own paper, and you're like, shoot, this stuff is like $40 a ream. That
Yeah.
was not a that was not a fun experiment. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
want to experiment. I always like to go. That's why I like to go through really fast. Is I like to try different variations of my scene because I don't want to be in the position of like forever wondering what if, you know what I mean? I almost like
Yeah.
to exhaust all my possibilities and explore them, so that when somebody comes along and said, well, did you ever think about doing this instead? I don't want to be in the position where I'm like, saying, oh, shoot, man. Oh, I should have thought about that. Oh, yeah, you're right. I should have
Yeah.
tried that. I want to be in the position where I'm like saying, you know what? I did, and I tried it out, and it just didn't work. But I did think about that. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so I would like to experiment. But like when you're using your own paper, it's like that wasn't funny. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like, like that's not funny. And sometimes I would actually erase the old stuff because, like, damn it, paper's too expensive. I'm gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
reuse that stuff. So what I ended up doing was saying, well, I mean, I have Digicel Flipbook. I can experiment all I want. It's like Marty and the DeLorean. It's like I have a time machine. I can go back to any time I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I could rough out my ideas. I can play them. I could scroll through it. I could play it back instantly, get a gist for it, and say, okay, yeah, okay, this will work. And now, granted, the drawings were always very, very loose and rough,
Hmm.
but that's what I do. It's like, once I get it loose and rough and I figure it'll work, then I have enough trust in myself to say, well, yeah, when you put all the bells and whistles on, it'll just look that much more. But I'm
Yeah.
very disciplined now in my in my approach to say, like, okay, it has to look like this now. You got to see past. You got to see more the head. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
are the
Yeah.
foundations there at least? Like, can you build on this? Like, yeah, So yeah, so that's what I would do. I would use digital means a lot. you
Yeah.
know.
Now you mentioned Hullabaloo. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So when you launched that, just to let you know, you've probably heard this, but we would gather around one computer at Disney, the entire marketing team, and we would watch the videos instead of doing our work as a team, being like, oh my God, he's going to revolutionize the 2D animation industry. This thing is unbelievable. And it filled us with so much inspiration. We go back to our desk and we'd be like, oh, we got to do it the way James would do it.
No
Like it
way.
was crazy.
Seriously.
Um, honestly. And I would just marvel at all the videos, as would my teammates, and we'd be like, this thing is so amazing looking. The sizzle reel for your campaign was like, oh my God, take my money.
Oh,
Like,
oh, well, thank
um,
you. Oh, thanks.
yeah, absolutely. So where's the project at right now? These things take a lot of time, a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears.
Or
So
tears, if
where?
anything.
Sure, yeah, I can imagine. So where's the project sitting at now? And do you still have the fire for it?
Oh yeah, well, uh, it's been this close to being done for a long, long, long time. No,
Yeah,
actually, no, honestly, we're really, really close to being done in terms of, like, because we got funding to do 4 shorts.
yeah.
Um, all of the 4 shorts are completely in color. All of the character animation
Wow.
is completely done. Cleanup is completely done. Um, the backgrounds, I think, are like 95% done. My process is that, working with my compositors, what we did what we decided to do based upon his recommendation is to uh, put the entire thing into color first,
Hmm.
and then correct it as it goes. So what I
Yeah.
would do is, like, I would paint like a temporary background, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
had all of the pieces in place, the general colors and everything, and I would give that to my compositor to pair with the animation, and he would
Right.
do, I guess, is what's like a rough comp, and
Yeah.
then we'd see what we'd have all together. Because I think before, what I was trying to do was like, well, let's get 3 shots in a row in color, and let's do a sweatbox session, you know, that kind of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. But then under his advisement, he was like, well, let's get the whole thing in color, and then we'll do like a color correction sweatbox pass at the end, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that kind of makes sense, you know, the way we're doing it. So that's why it's like that's what I say, everything's in color. It's just we're at the stage now where we're okay, now I'm putting the final details on the background now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like now I'm
Yeah.
now we're just swapping out the old with the new. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this bridge now has more detail, so swap that out. It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Um and like now we're just doing like uh you know, there was the whole CG aspect of it that we included in there. We could talk about that in a bit, but
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of the holdup. But then, you know, it's like you know, last minute effects, like, you know, like, oh, I guess we need some dust in there, or oh, I guess we need some, you know, that kind of thing. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well then I'll do it. And then what I'll do is I will literally like spend Saturday afternoon rough out dust effects on Saturday afternoon. Um, Export it, upload it to Dropbox, send my compositor an email saying, "Okay, it's good. Go grab it,"
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
he'll composite it in. It's like that, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, but it's very much on the fly. Like now we're finding little things to touch it up with, you know, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Are you going to release a line test version of each episode?
yeah,
Please
I
say
thought about
yes.
it. I know. Yeah, I mean, what my plan was to do was I wanted to, and I want to release like the storyboard version, you
Oh,
know.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, even do like you know what they do, like the storyboard to film comparison, where they might have the
Yes.
storyboard in the corner and stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to do, which I just saw recently, that I think Stranger Things was doing, was what do they call it? A shot by shot thing, where
Mm-hmm.
they go through the film and they stop it, and then the actors will describe like what was involved in the shot. Like they'll say things like little anecdotes, like oh, that little space was so tight, we all had to remember we all had a cramp in there, and it was like, you know, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's so funny. So what I wanted to do is like a shot by shot with hullabaloo and say, okay, this shot here, okay, uh,
Yeah.
this was, you know, this was animated by, not say, you know, by who, but it's like this was initially animated this way, but then we reanimated it, and then I remember, you know, then the compositor said this and we did that, because I think there's little interesting things along the way, because um you know, like the whole process, I think, you know, why we're kind of, I don't know, like taking as long as we are. Well, it's a different too, because again, when we first did the campaign thing, we only were going to do one short, and I
Mm-hmm.
at that time I said I would be lucky, I would feel lucky if we got enough money to do one short, you know.
Yeah.
The fact that we got the funding that we did just kind of blew my mind, and we were riding this wave of like, you know, let's keep it going, let's
Mm-hmm.
tack on another short, and then another one, and a third one, and then a fourth one. And I remember my wife saying, when are you gonna have time to do all this? You gotta cut
Yeah.
it off. I'd be like,
Yeah.
you know what, oh shit, you're right, you know what I mean, yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it, we're not doing any more shorts, that's it, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, as a result, it was a thing where um well, now that really complicated things, because now it was like, oh, you know, I thought I was going to turn around this stuff quickly. Well, now instead of 5 minutes of material, I'm going to have like 22 minutes of material to, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
produce. But I always knew I could do it. You know, I mean, it wasn't, you know, a thing. It would just mean it would just take a little bit longer. And
Yeah.
um, at the time, um, the person who was doing the uh, scanning and compositing for me, not the scanning, yeah, the scanning, ink and paint, was also going to do the compositing. So,
Mm-hmm.
this person was going to scan my drawings, ink and paint my drawings, bucket fill, color them, and
Mm-hmm.
then I would give him a background, and he would composite it together.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, but I knew
Yeah.
that we could do it because we had done it before on another project, previously,
Yeah.
and we had worked together, and so I knew we could pull it off, undoubtedly. What happened was, um, when I created my campaign video, a friend of mine introduced me, the friend who my friend who, uh, I could kind of consider my producer now, who kind of discovered me on the internet and whatever, and helped me, get momentum behind my project. Um,
Mm-hmm.
who was also very instrumental in crafting the campaign and everything. She's like this. I don't want to call it a media guru or something like that, but she knows media. That's her job, And,
Yeah.
and anyways, so she was guiding me throughout the whole process about, what do you want to do? This is how you want to set up the campaign. This is how you want to craft it. This is how you want to phrase things. All that marketing.
Oh, you're so lucky to have had that. So many of us have to do it ourselves, and we don't have any idea how to go about doing it.
Yeah, because the way I was going to start it out was, writing the campaign is like, I think I started out the first one like, hey guys, it's me, Jamie.
Yes.
It's like, hey, listen, I want to do this film, and hey, if you have any spare change, I would love to get it.
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And my friend, Evelyn, her name's Evelyn. It was like the IT guy on Saturday Night Live, if you remember that skit where it's like, move,
Yeah. Yeah.
move. and so I get out of my chair, and then she sits down. Well, actually, her friend Jeff does it, and they start writing. And it's like, it's like the composer in Bugs Bunny. It's like they kind of do the knuckle crack,
Yeah.
like the hair whip, and it's like, ta-da! It's like Tootie needs to be saved. It's important. You got to give money now. Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And the thing is that it wasn't a gimmick. It was just a different way of seeing it, because you see, I was seeing it as like a meek thing like this, where she was looking at it like from a different angle. She's like, James, it's like, you don't, because she was thinking about like people like yourself and your colleagues who would be looking at it on the other end. She had the objective opinion about my work to be able to say, no, James, you don't understand. What you have going here is so much more than what you have in your own head. You know what I mean? It's like this project has the potential to inspire young women to want to get into science. This is going to be their science fiction hero. This is not something that you can go into like, you got to go out strong. You got to go bold.
Yeah.
This is
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. And it's like, well, Evelyn, I don't know how to be that way. It's just like, it's okay. That's why I'm here. So just stand aside, let me do my thing. And so, it was like, okay,
I got to talk to this Evelyn person, because
honestly,
she could help us out a huge amount.
Yeah, no, she's really great. And what she does is that her thing is that she is a godsend upon this earth. I know people throw that around, but I really don't use that lightly, because you see, she is so giving of herself, and she asks very little in return. As in fact, really nothing in return. I mean, she has a heart of gold in the way that what she loves artists. And what she does is she wants to see them succeed. And she's like an artist herself. She has artist sensibilities, but the problem is that she can't actually really create art herself. How she creates art in her way is by finding two people and putting them together and saying, you can do this and you can do that. I need to put you two together.
Yeah.
To make
that's a great skill.
Yeah. It's like, I
Yeah.
need to put you two together, and you two together can make something. So let me segue back into what I was about to get to, is that
Hmm.
she said, well, you have to have a nice campaign video. It has to look nice. It has to sound nice. You know what I mean? It can't sound like it was, a tin can in your garage, that kind of thing. And it has to be in focus and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It says, like,
Yeah.
I have a friend that lives out in LA that can come by, and he's good at this stuff. He can bring his camera and he'll film you, in your office and for your video. Um, and he came over and he did it. And once he saw what I was doing, he's like, "Oh, I love this." And what he did is he worked in, he was a freelance visual effects artist. So he would do things like, put the gun flashes in films
Hmm.
and, do all the inlay backgrounds, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was working out of his apartment, and he took a look at my project and what I was doing. He said, let me try something. Can I get some of your materials? And so I sent him um, some final frames, exported PNGs of my animation, and I gave him a background. And I said, okay, all right, I'll be right back. And a little time later, I get an email from him with a video, a QuickTime video attached, and he says, "What do you
Yeah.
think of this?" And he showed me, and I I was just blown away. I was like, "Oh my God!" Like it had it had God rays in it. It had little specks of dust floating in it. It had like it was just so like it had like a lens flare or something like that. And I was like,
Hmm.
wait, what, like how? Now I remember he,
Yeah.
he used to dabble in magic, but this is like a magic I've never seen before. I'm like, how do you? What? Wait. I mean, but who? But how? But wait, but who? But what? What?
Yeah.
Like I said, he just
That's
laughed
crazy.
and he's like, and he told me, because what he was doing was uh, compositing in After Effects, whereas the
Yeah.
person that was originally um, going to do my compositing was using Toon Boom Harmony.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And
And After Effects is a beast of a program
yeah,
and, a rabbit hole of
yeah.
potential. Yeah.
And what he was doing was he was coming at it from a visual effects artist point of view, from a live
Yeah.
action kind of point of view, and
But it put that cinematic quality on it that was complementary to the older style of visuals
yeah,
and yet contemporary in the overall it's relevant to what today's audience would want to see,
right, exactly,
so it was really wonderful to see that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then, it was a thing where, okay, so I said, well, of course, my natural question was like, well, how often can you do this?
Yeah.
Can you keep this up? Can you sustain can you do this for like the rest of the film? Like, he said, yeah, I
Yeah.
can, that kind of thing. And so I
Yeah.
had to go back to my original compositor, and I showed him what this guy had done, and my original compositor was really thrilled with it too. And I think he wanted a crack at it as well. He wanted to see, well, let me see what I can do.
Hmm.
And so he took a crack at it. And to be perfectly honest, between the two, they were virtually identical. I think what it was the tools are there. They're just like hidden. What it requires is somebody with that kind of eye or that sensibility to think, to want to use them in that capacity. That's what it was.
And also to make something do something that it's not intended to do is a big part of this. Like there are programs used for they're designed for a certain thing, but if you use them in this way, it adds this wonderful visual or audio sense or whatever, right? You just have to have that out of the box approach to the process.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
and what my compositor's been doing, I mean, we can't get into it now. Maybe we could have like a follow up later, when the
sure,
thing comes out,
absolutely.
could kind of do a whole rollout. But what he's doing
Yeah.
is kind of amazing because now he's starting to use things like Blender
Yeah.
And he's doing things where it's like he's taking my artwork and he's putting it through Blender, and he's making it in such a way that it almost, I don't want to say that it looks like CG, but it it's my artwork, but it looks like it was modeled or something like that, like in CG. So we can do
Well,
like
like
camera moves.
Klaus.
Well, not. I know what you mean, like that, but not quite.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is like it gives my artwork a different dimension. I guess it's
Hmm.
probably like CG, not exactly like Klaus.
I'm
But
so
anyways,
excited to see this.
yeah. But the point is that it's one of those things that I am watching like a spectator, and this guy who's doing these amazing things, and he's taking the time to learn these programs, for the sake of creating the show better. Now, here's the problem: is that okay? Here's why it's taking so long, is because you know. With After Effects, you have all these plugins and stuff. Um, it would be different if we had a studio and we had all the licenses and everyone was sharing the same plugins.
Hmm.
The thing is, we only have one compositor, and that compositor
Yeah.
can only do it whenever he has time to do it. You see, I looked into the process. I asked him, I said, well, what if we brought somebody else on? Because I had a few other friends that knew compositing. And he said, and it wasn't because he didn't want to. It's just that it says, well, in order for them to do it, they would have to have my same plugins, and it's
Hmm.
all the way that the program is set up. It's all it's just
Yeah.
meant for him. So it's a weird thing because it's like, oh shoot, it's just him. But he's doing the project so well. So I'm like, okay, well,
Man, you better make sure he doesn't like go mountain climbing or
no, I know,
traveling
I
or
know, I know. Let's talk about that. Knock on wood. No, seriously, I'm
yeah.
like, no,
Whew.
I don't even think about that. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, because it was very nerve wracking all the time, and and that's why I said, well, just output a version without the time code, because it's like,
Yeah.
I'll just release that if I have to. But the point is,
I can't wait to see it, and I'm actually so happy to hear you mention. Oh, maybe we come back on after it comes out. So I was going to ask you about doing that to come back on and talk about a few scenes here and there that pose particular challenges or look so amazing, but ended up being easier than you thought. Like, kind of walk us through a few things. So
yeah.
if you're up for that, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I'd be totally up for that. I think it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, and that's what I wanted to do with this. I mean, in some ways, uh, launching this whole process, I had in mind to kind of make be transparent about the process. I was going to say, like, because we were going to do a blog, and we did a blog for a while. It's like, and it's like, gosh, how do you share with the public, this process? That's why I'm
Yeah.
saving the first passes of each scene, and and eventually I'll come out with, like, and I'm kind of doing it now, like a series of videos that just kind of, we do this, then we do that, then we
Yeah.
do that, and you can see the end, and there you go. And people's
Yeah.
responses have been kind of like, wow, I had no idea there were so many layers to the process. And I'm like, yeah, see, there you go. You see, it's like,
Yeah.
and each of these scenes, it's not like you do them once. You see, this is the thing that I think probably mystifies people, is that they think you do it once,
Yeah.
or do it twice. You know what I mean? You maybe do it once and you figure what's wrong, and then you do it the second time, you get it right. No, we have version 5, version 6, version 7.
Yeah.
It's constantly showing me quick times of, like, okay, how about this? How about this? And then I'm doing draw overs, and I go back, touch on that. Okay, how about this? Getting closer here. Let me draw up a note, send it back, do that. A day
Yeah.
later, and the stuff, like, I mean, you have to think, like, 200 shots. Was it 200 shots or something like that? Like, each one of those 200 shots need to be done 5 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
turn around and you start doing the math, because even I went to, you know, I've had conversations with my crew, my compositor. I'm like, you know, are we doing this right? I mean, it's taking a really long time. Are we doing this right? Am I, wrong? And
Hmm.
he pointed out, he said, he's like, James, think about it. It's like, you know, you have, you have 4 shorts, 5 shorts. You've been doing this for 5 years, production 6 years. That's a year per short. You know what I mean? A 5 minute short.
Hmm.
That's not so
Yeah.
bad. You have
Yeah.
200 shots. There's 52 weekends, 52 weeks in a year. You know what I mean? It's like if you work
And
on it
you're doing it at feature film level, which is crazy.
right.
And so appreciated by the audience, but just so much work.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I think hopefully when it's done, it'll be, seen and appreciated that way, and I think it's like, yeah, it's just understanding, trying to, you know, convey to people, the amount of work that's really, really involved. And yeah, it does take time because I guess, my feeling is, yeah, if I wanted to, I could probably cobble something together and release it today as is, and it
Hmm.
might be just fine. But I don't want to be like just fine. I want to say like, no, I think that we need to color correct that. I think those effects could be a little bit better. I think
Yeah.
I think if we do this or that, let's do that. It's like, okay, well, I'll get to it next week. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, as long as you get to it next week, fine. As long as my whole thing was like, as long as it's looking good, like as long as we're making progress, you know what I mean, like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. There's never been a process where we've been going backwards, you know what I mean. It's always been looking good with each pass. It's just, I just wish it could be faster, that's all, and I'm sure everybody
Yeah.
else does too.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, like you said, like the feature quality thing, there's only 4 of us. It's like, I mean, yeah, at one time I think we had 20 people working on it when we were actual in production of animation. But
Wow.
now that we're in really kind of what I think is called post, considered
Hmm.
to be post, um, there's only just like 2 or 3 of us that are just,
That's mind-boggling.
uh,
Yeah. Has it been as satisfying a project as you romanticized it to be when you first came up with it?
um, I think yes, and even more so. I think
Mm.
once this compositor showed me like what we can do with this stuff, I kind of got like a new energy about it, and that's why I keep up the energy because I'm so excited about it. And he keeps making new ground with things, that I didn't know were exactly possible. And part of that says, oh well, shoot, now that I know we can do that, let me rethink this shot a little bit. Okay, well, you know okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe we're not going to use particle effects. I'm going to animate these things myself. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
like that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just it's been so exciting throughout, and
Have
engaging.
your
Oh,
have your peers been encouraging?
oh yeah, they've been great.
Yeah.
I mean, like we
Yeah.
would get together, like at the time, like we would have like anniversary get-togethers. Like I think like a Tarzan anniversary or something like
Yeah.
that. And I'd show up, or we'd go to the union party. I'd go to the union party, and I'd run into people, and everybody's been great. Of course, there's the question like, when is it coming out? And I keep saying
Sure. Yeah.
soon, and I or I'd go to the conventions, and run into my peers there. They'd come up to the booth, and they would be just like, man, I can't wait till it's done. It's looking great. Go for it. Go, cheering me
Yeah.
on. And that's been so invigorating. So, whatever. And that's been really great. And,
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, thank you
That's
for that.
awesome.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing with the Hullabaloo project is what so many of us dream about. Either have no idea how to make it happen, or we don't have the mental discipline to keep the energy up required to get it across the finish line. Because a lot of us fill up sketchbooks with potential properties and that type of thing, right? But you're actually doing it, and I think that's what gravitates a lot of the animation related artists to it, because we're just like, look, he's almost to the top of the mountain. Look at him up there,
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, when it comes out, I know a lot of people are wondering about it, and it's going to be just hopefully a big explosion, just like Klaus was for 2D.
Yeah.
Um, I don't find it very difficult to imagine that when Hullabaloo comes out, the same type of "oh my God" will be there for it.
Oh, thanks.
So
Yeah, I hope
yeah,
so. I mean, I would love for it to be a source of inspiration, to a certain, group of people, particularly, up and coming filmmakers and animators,
yeah,
to really realize that, I mean, we have, thankfully, it's a great time to be alive as an animator because we have the means in order to do this. I think, and I'm just glad that, like I'm young enough to do it too, because I mean, I can't imagine if we had everything we did when I was in my early 20s,
yeah,
because back then to produce animation was a real to do. I mean, you actually needed like shelving space. You needed you know what I mean? You needed, to have all the cells, and you needed to buy
yeah,
actual paints, and you needed that kind of stuff. Um, it seemed impossible to produce, on an
yeah.
independent level.
Oh, it's an
Yeah,
insane art form.
yeah,
In its analog form.
yeah,
It's maddening.
yeah.
And yet it was done for so long that way and at such a high quality that it still continues to inspire people who have all the new age tools, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it was to the new people coming up today what Renaissance painting would be to, like even back then where they had to actually go out and pluck the hairs off a hog to make a brush,
Right.
right?
Right.
And here we are with like, oh, I'm going to download a new brush for Photoshop, right?
Yeah, I know.
So,
And I think about that a lot. I mean, I think about like when things get to be too hard, I think they were tougher at a different time, It's like,
yeah, yeah,
and it's like if we could have done it then, we can do this. And I think about that a lot. I think about all of the effort those, artists put in on Fantasia. It's like, well, if they can do that, then I could probably take some time and do this overlap right. you know,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah. Have you struggled with that feeling of, oh, it's good enough, I just got to move on?
Yeah, I have, and there was
Yeah,
part of me that does kind of say, well, there's a prudent part of me that does say, yeah, this may just have to be good enough for the greater good of moving forward and
hmm,
getting it done and out. That's just what I may do, and I've always kind of worked with this mental exercise of acceptance of that. Okay, uh, maybe wasn't the best that has ever been done. Um, Maybe it's not the best that I will ever do, but
hmm,
it's the best that I can do right now,
hmm,
this very moment.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
that's where we're at. You see what I mean? So that's where I
yeah,
kind of say, like, I go into this thinking I'm going to make the best thing ever, and I think, well, okay, you gave it a try. It's not the best thing that would ever be done. That's cool. You can live with
yeah,
that. Um, you know what? As you grow older, you're going to get better. So don't
yeah,
don't don't be the 10-year-old out self. Be the person now. And then that's
yeah.
where I kind of say, well, this is the best that you can do it now in the time given with all the things, whatever, and that's perfectly fine. Move on.
Is there a scene that sticks out in your mind as your personal best execution of perfect acting combined with the draftsmanship of drawing it out? Or is there a scene that haunts you that you're like, oh, I wish that wasn't out there for the public to see? I want to redo it, but it's too late.
Yeah, there's a few of those.
Yeah.
Um, I think there are scenes that kind of were tent poles for me. Um, like I remember because going back to uh, Kingdom of the Sun, Emperor's New Groove, or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, I think one of the tests that I think I have on my site or whatever of Prince Manco doing his acting, that was the one that I think uh, put me where I needed to be, where convinced me that it's like I did it. Like
Hmm.
I had gotten over the top of the hill. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I made it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I struggled. It was a culmination of everything, but I did it. And then that's when that was my last shot when they decided to pull the plug. And I'm so glad that I just eked it in just in time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I would
There's
have been, you know.
you're talking about that movie, and there's a scene in the documentary where Andreas Deja says it's not until you put your pencil down on your very last scene where you feel the confidence that you're ready to start.
Yep. That's
You
absolutely
know.
true. Like we would always say,
Yeah.
we would always have this like grief or sadness at the end of the film. Like I can't believe it's all done, and I just feel like just now got my confidence on it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I wish you could do it again, because then um, I would do so much better. Like I look back at like a lot of work, and I think like like Bebe's Kids, which is like an old animated
Yeah.
film. It's like, man, I would have loved to have done that with the skill sets that I have now, because you know what I mean? It's like I feel much more confident now than I did back then, and the material was so funny, and I would have
Yeah.
loved to have worked on it with confidence, as opposed to crossing my fingers with every scenes, going, God, I hope this will work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Oh
um,
man.
yeah, there's been a couple here and there that I kind of look at again, and like you said, they're kind of like, I don't know if I could do that again if I tried, and it kind of
Yeah.
bothers me, because it's like, wait, am I degrading or what? You know what I mean? Like, oh no, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it comes down to really feeling the true inspiration, being in the moment, in the zone, and it sort of comes from elsewhere. You hear singers and songwriters talk about that. Like, I don't know where it came from. It just came out of me, but it wasn't me. It was from somewhere else. I think animators have their own version of that,
definitely.
and in retrospect, when you're looking back on your career or your previous job and you're analyzing things and trying to take count of the highs and the lows, I think it's okay to just sort of give yourself to the idea that art form isn't, maybe there is an element of it that just comes from the ether and flows through you, and just be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I look through it, and you know, looking back, I think a lot of it is almost like it's like a scrapbook in a weird way. Like when you go through a
Hmm.
scrapbook and you see an old photo and you instantly remember um, a moment in time. I mean, that's what I think a lot of these films are like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what's kind of nice for us, is like, I watch some of the old films, and I immediately go back to like, oh, I remember that daily session when so and so showed it, and I remember, it's like a different, it's like stories that, it's like a photo album. It's like these are like
Yeah.
photo albums now,
Yeah.
um, and you even go
Now,
through like,
without giving out names,
uh-huh.
have there been sweatbox sessions that have like been so intense and full of conflict, people defending their work, that it just like, almost a fist fight could break out, because we as the public and people probably romanticize that. Everybody's just like, oh yes, good point, yes, I think I'll carry that through to my next attempt. But some people really, like, in those sessions, you can really get hung up on like, no, it has to be like this, and
Oh, absolutely. No, and
yeah.
it's funny. I kept a journal. Yeah, like I kept journals quite frequently, and I'm glad that I did, because I started reading back over some of them, and I totally forgot like some of these instances took place, and I'm like, oh yeah, shoot, that's right. I do remember when so and so said that. Oh, and I remember, yeah.
Yeah. I get the feeling these journals could cancel culture, the entire Disney animation industry, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, no, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I know. It's like when they did the Sweatbox, that movie, The Sweatbox.
Yeah.
I was thinking like, yeah, thinking, man, you guys got some amazing stuff here, because I
Yeah.
mean, and when you see the sweatbox, it wasn't even all the stuff that went down. You know what I mean? Even the
Yeah.
stuff at the animator level. No, seriously, we were very. I mean, yeah, these sweatbox. Well, really, how it used to be. This is how it used to be. Is before Lassiter. I'm almost like, before Lassiter and after Lassiter.
Yeah.
Before Lassiter, we didn't have an organized daily session. What it was every Monday. I think it was, if I remember, Mondays, like Monday mornings, they would have dailies in the theater, and it wasn't mandatory, but people were expected to go. You just kind of sat in the theater. They would run the dailies, and the why you were encouraged to go is because you would want to see the work of your peers. That was really the only way you could really see the work of your peers.
Yeah.
And then when you leave, you can go down the hallway and you could run into somebody and say, "Oh, hey man, I saw your shot in dailies. Looked really cool." I'm like, "Oh,
Hmm.
thanks, man. Great." And then you kind of keep going, and that was how you
Yeah.
kind of build the camaraderie. We did have like the server, I think at that time, as we were starting to use computers, and sometimes you can go into folders and kind of peek around, you know what I mean? And
Snooping.
kind of snoop. And it always
Yeah.
felt very sneaky, although it was a valid way to do. And you kind of look like, oh, let me take a look. And you'd open up their file and be like, oh, interesting. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so we would look that way, but we never had like this organized thing. It wasn't until like Lasseter took over, and then what he did is he brought the culture of Pixar of
Hmm.
doing dailies as a group, that we started doing that, and then it was mandatory that everyone go, and it was a thing where there were no bad ideas, so anybody can contribute. I mean, I'm talking about the production manager, the production assistant, anybody that just happened to be in the room that time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Could
Yeah.
comment on a scene, and yeah, I think there were a few times where, yeah, you definitely had, somebody that was trying to defend their idea, and somebody sharing one, and you'd almost wish they just kind of shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I think part of it goes to either they really believed in that idea, or they realize like, if we go with this person's idea, I'm going to have to redo my entire scene, and therefore I'm going to lose my footage for the week. And
Well,
that,
that's a great point because animation is a ripple effect in both directions, right? One
yeah,
small change here, there's that ripple effect. And yeah, I mean, I remember times people saying, "Oh, if you do that, I'm going to have to go change all this stuff." And, I've got these other projects waiting I got to get on. And then it creates, well, is it good enough, or are we going to forget good enough and go for perfect? And it's a balancing act of uh, time versus money and quality, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a lot of considerations to be made,
yeah,
but I think a lot of time at the end, it was like, what has to be done right, even if it takes longer to do.
yeah,
And of course, management would always go, but then somebody would, it would fall upon
yeah,
somebody, blame the directors, that they could take the beating. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a real engaging process, and I think what it really did allow for us is to see, like, it was kind of inspiring in a way, because you kind of you kind of either say, like, you look at it and you say, oh damn, it's looking really good, I got to step up my game. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like, oh, I can see what other people are doing, maybe I should be stepping up my game to make it be just as good. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that kind of thing. And yeah.
No, it's your career is so inspiring, and I'm gonna let you get back to the rest of your day here, but just in closing, I just really want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for being such a big inspiration for me, unknowingly, absolutely. But I mean, your level of artistry and animation and stuff like that, it really I really click with it. And, it's always great when I get to meet people and just let them know, like, hey, you pulled me up out of some depressing times of self-doubt through inspiration. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. No, that's really nice to hear, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, it's good to be here. I mean, it's great to be able to kind of share ideas, with everyone on this type of platform. And
Yeah.
and no, thank you for thinking of me to participate. And
Oh yes, you've been on my hit list, so to speak, for quite a while. So, yes, I'll let you go. And any links or if there's supporting videos that you can point me towards that I can intercut in the podcast, like some hullabaloo line tests or whatever, I'll
Oh,
follow up with you in email. And we're good to go.
okay. Yeah, I think you could do that. That would be great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thanks so much, James.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
Nice to
Okay.
meet you, and
Nice to meet you.
we'll talk more.
Yeah, definitely talk more.
All
Awesome.
right.
Okay. Take care,
Bye-bye.
my friend. Okay.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye. We want to hear from you. Go to dtipodcast.com. Check out all of our social media links. Leave comments, like, subscribe, all that stuff. It really helps. We have more great guests coming up here on Drawn to It Podcast.